Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got quite a bit to cover and relatively short window to get it done. Just by introduction, my name is John Reardon with Harvest Technology Group. Greg Manning is assisting us with the sign-up sheets. One of the reasons why we send the sign-up sheets out is that this session is recorded, and we will email you a link to the recording of either today's session or yesterday's session at the conclusion of the conference. So in the next couple of days, you'll see those sessions come out. We're going to talk about integrated document management for SunGard, the title of the presentation. And what we really are talking about is our solution called Content 360. It's what we call an enterprise content management solution. And we say enterprise because it can be used by every department within the school district. So even though as we go through this presentation, we're going to show some examples from finance, some examples from human resources and student, just know that the solution itself is flexible enough to be used across the entire district. We say content because in today's society, paper really is just a small portion of what you have to manage. Email content is rapidly growing. Electronic forms, PDFs, those type of things are all areas of content that we have to manage. And Content 360 gives us the flexibility to do that. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the scanning and indexing process, because that's typically where most people start with content management. They say, I've got this filing cabinet, I've got these rooms full of archives, I need to do something with that. So we'll show you how to work with that. But increasingly, more and more, we're dealing with PDF forms, with e-forms, with making sure that people have access to the right information when they're supposed to have it. Now, I know that many of you may have a different SIS system than ERP system, which is not a problem. With very limited exceptions, all the integrations we're going to talk about work with all of the major SIS and ERP solutions on the market today. So even if you're not using SunGard for one side of the school district or the other, you can still use Content 360 as your enterprise document management solution. So let's jump into it. And one of the things that we stress inside of our document management solution, inside Content 360, is that we want your users to be in SunGard or in their other line of business application as much as possible. That's where they're doing their job. So what we want to do is we want to be able to surface and provide information to them when they need it. Okay, so when I'm looking at an employee screen inside Finance Plus, or if I'm looking at an employee screen inside Business Plus, and I want to see documents related to this to help me perform my job function, we have an integration button that allows us to go into and click this button, and it will retrieve documents related to data on this screen inside Business Plus. Now, I'm going to show this as it relates to just retrieving based upon the employee ID. So when I click the button, I can see the I-9 form, or I can see a list of forms directly from inside. These documents are inside of Content 360, but I'm able to surface them from my SunGard screens. Any questions about that? Okay. So again, what we're looking to do is allow our users to work inside of their line of business applications, and then we surface documents to them. Now, once inside, I can annotate these documents. I can add notes if I want to. I can highlight information. I can redact information. So I have a number of options and things I can do with the documents once they're inside of Content 360. Everything but folding it. This is document management humor. There's not a lot of this, so you guys can work with me here. Again, inside of eSchool Plus, just showing in this example that I can click a button and retrieve a range of documents. So inside of Content 360, our documents are organized by a content type. This is the generic class of the documents. And then we have individual index values, which help us to discern which document it is. So in the student example, index values are student ID, first name, last name, homeroom, things of that nature. With employee documents and with finance documents, we have different index values. Okay, looking at Teacher Access Center, not sure. Do we have any eSchool Plus users in here at all? Okay, just a couple? Okay, all right. So inside of Teacher Access Center, this is another level of integration. Going into the student drawer, clicking the integration button and retrieving documents. This is an area that's growing a lot for us, and we're able to provide teachers with access to documents based upon their roster, their current rostered students. So again, and from a security perspective, This is locked down to only what we give teachers access to. Okay, in most cases, that is how your users will access content. They will be in their line of business applications clicking and retrieving documents, but there are times when you're going to want to look for a range of documents. So I need to see documents from this date to this date, or I need to see all of the AP vendor invoices for, in this example, starting with the letter B. I can't remember the exact name of the vendor, so I'm just going to use Boolean or wildcard logic, click the search button, and then I have access to all the documents. And again, from that link, I can just pop it up. So we can get fairly granular with how you're accessing those documents. Any questions about that so far? Okay, fantastic. All right, and again, this is another example from a student document retrieval. Let's talk a little bit about capture. And we spend time in capture because this is where most school districts will stumble a little bit when implementing a document management solution. It's the one area where we're adding steps to the process. So things that, now, and again, even though we're going to talk about scanning as a potential option, we really don't like scanning if at all possible. So if you have content in a digital format, we want it to stay digital. We never want to have to print and then rescan if at all possible. So anything being generated by your SunGard applications, Business Plus, eSchool Plus, or Finance Plus, can automatically, at print time, be captured, indexed, and stored into Content 360. So when I run report cards, transcripts, purchase orders, those documents can automatically be stored inside Content 360, and they're fully indexed, and then able to be retrieved by click of a button. Other content, again, if it's inbound faxes, if it's things that are being printed on multifunction devices, if it's office documents or any sort of paper, they're going to require one additional step in the indexing process. So the mail comes in, I've got a stack of AP vendor invoices, I've got a new hire and they filled out a bunch of paper, I've got to scan that into the software. Now, the scanning portion is pretty straightforward, right? You drop it into a multifunction device or a scanner, it scans, but then I've got to apply index values to those. And this, again, is the one step where we don't want to have people to go in and just start keying in information. Number one, because if they type like me, it's a very inaccurate process, but it's also, it can take a while to populate all these values. So here I've got an emergency medical form. It's been filled out manually, scanned into the software, and I don't want to have to start then reading this information and typing into each of these fields so I can retrieve it at a later date. So in here we use our integrations with SunGard, Business Plus, eSchool Plus, Finance Plus, to be able to use the data in those applications to complete my indexing process. So in this example, this is an employee ID. I'm going to fill in a single data element. When I click auto populate, Content 360 will go out into SunGard and grab all the other index values that we want to store this document by. Okay? If this were a student example, student ID is typically the index value we use. Accounts payable, we use purchase order in most cases. Is everyone clear what we're doing there? The reason why we do that? Okay. So it's much faster than typing, it's much more accurate, and it assures the data that matches, the data that we're storing this document by matches the data that's in our SunGard applications. Okay, if we wanted to go a little bit more advanced in our capture process, we do have full OCR capabilities. So by OCR, I'm going into the document itself, I'm reading that information, I'm extracting it as searchable text, and then I'm using this as our index values. So what does that look like? And I will be very candid in this also. This is typically going to be used in an accounts payable example. In some cases, we'll use it in human resources if we have control over the form itself. But if if you're getting a lot of handwritten documents, you're not going to OCR those. You won't get the read rates that you need to do that accurately. But we can read it. If the document is mostly handwritten, and especially if it's free form, sometimes if it's in little black boxes like you see in credit card applications and things like that, then you can improve your read rates. But otherwise, we're going to be looking to do more manual indexing in those processes. So OCR, ICR, OMR, signature detection, even line item detail extraction if you really want to get serious about automated capture. Again, speaking very candidly, most school districts have limited application for some of this, especially outside of the finance world. Okay. I will show you just very quickly an application that could be used inside of human resources or in students. So here we've been able to grab information off of a birth certificate. We've got a read error there. When I highlight the error, it shows me where it found the data, highlights the questionable character. We can correct that, and then again use auto-populate to make sure that the data matches up. So this is kind of cool in the sense that we really don't have a lot of data on this form that we can use, right? This is a birth certificate. So even the last name could be wrong in this document. But with a few clicks, I can index this by a number of different fields. Okay, any questions about OCR or capture? All right, fantastic. Let's jump into an area that we're seeing a lot of use, and that is in the HTML PDF forms. So this right now is this is kind of a mock-up. This is a sample we did for St. Johns County. They're a Business Plus user down in just outside of Jacksonville, Florida, in St. Augustine. And one of the things we want to do when we talk about e-forms and using these effectively, how many of you have been to the doctor recently? Right? The first thing, if you've had an insurance change, they hand you a clipboard, and I always hate touching the pens in there too, but I think it's just me, I'm a germaphobe. But and what you do at the top of every form is your name and your address, and the next form, name, address, over and over and over again. And I keep thinking to myself, there's got to be a better way to do this. So one of the things we're piloting with St. Johns County is the ability to use data that we're capturing on a generic sheet and then populating additional forms with that information. So I'm going to grab a seat and show you what this looks like. So inside of the form, so we're going to have what we're calling a new hire packet. And again, this is a sample document. I can type in my information, and you can see that it's filling in data in the form in subsequent PDF forms, right? So this really, really helps improve the new hire process. But even so, I think there's actually an E on the end of Radcliffe. It would be helpful if I had this information in another application, something like AppleTrack or Frontline, or if I've used something to capture data about this employee, I may be able to go in and automate this process even further. Just going to fill in information here. By grabbing that data and pre-populating it into the form itself using similar functionality that we're using on the indexing side for auto-populate. So again, by keying in an employee ID or something else, we're able to grab much more data and then populate and fill that into the subsequent forms. So that really improves our data capture effort. Again, making sure that Henry doesn't enter if he's called Hank Radcliffe, right? Because then I've got a problem with data error matching up, and it just improves the overall flow of how we're working with e-forms. So using a student example, and e-forms for us are really two different types. We love PDF forms because they're easy to build, easy to work with, but also we do a lot with HTML forms now. This is something that's only been recently available for us, but HTML forms, we can really go in and build some very powerful applications where you can add lines to the form, you can save in the middle of completion of a process and come back to it at a later date. So a lot of different things you can do from that perspective. But just even within PDF forms though, we can use the same autofill functionality, checkboxes, drop-down lists, and then using mouse or digital signature pad to sign the documents, and give intermittent lockdown ability to some of these documents. So after it's signed, this becomes ineditable from a PDF perspective. Now, forms are kind of like potato chips in that you can never have just one. Document management humor, more and more. Okay, but generally, the forms are routed. They're the entry, the onboarding step to a workflow. So what happens when a form is filled out? I mean, this process, forms are used for everything in K-12 school districts, to turning on the lights to a certain time in the gymnasium, to changing your benefits applications. So every time a form is completed, there's generally some action that has to take place inside the school district. With Content 360, that for us follows a workflow. And finally, at the end of the form process, we want to lock those documents down. Those forms become part of the record or for the employee, the student queuing folder, or wherever it needs to go. So inside Content 360, workflow is a very necessary step in order for us to really leverage the power of e-forms. I mean, in many cases you may be saying, oh, well, our district is already using PDF forms. That's great. What's the routing method? Generally, it's email, or sometimes it's print, inter-office mail. Okay. In order to really have an effective paperless solution, we want to utilize workflow, which allows us to then monitor and track where those forms are going throughout our district. So inside of Content 360 workflow, we break these processes down by logical steps, and those logical steps for us are called queues, right? So when the form enters the workflow, where does it need to step, who needs to see it, and what action are we expecting them to take on that document? So in this example, we're going to route this document to the administration building. That's the first step in the workflow. When I click on that queue, I see all the actions or all the forms in that that require my attention. And I can sort these if I have a lot to figure out what requires my immediate attention and what can we do at a later time. When I select the action, I'm going to have the actions I can take, and I'm also going to see a list of all the related documents. So we recognize before we complete this student maintenance form that I need to have access to the discipline reports, and I need to see other supporting documents before I can make an intelligent decision. So we want to give our users the best chance of success in completing their job. What information do they need to make a decision? How can we present it to them in the fastest, easiest way possible? And then once they have that information completed, they can go and say, okay, yep, I'm going to send this to the administration building, I'm going to send it to Norika, and move on in the process. A couple of things are happening in the back end. Anytime a document enters or exits a workflow queue, we keep track of that. So we have timers. We also have the ability to then send out notifications. So if you're living and breathing inside of workflow all the time, you don't want to receive an email every time someone sends a form to you. But if it's something that you're rarely used to doing, then an email notification can be very helpful. Okay. And finally, as we're tracking this information, we're able to build audit reports to find out what happens. So in this workflow process, how long did a document get in? How long is it taking my documents on average to move from this step to this step, and why? And at that point in time, once we have this information gathered over time, we can make decisions about our process on an informed basis to determine where we can gain efficiencies. Any questions about this process also? Now, many of you may be using Workflow in Business Plus or in Finance Plus. This is not meant as a replacement for that. So if you have your AP approval process nailed down inside Business Plus, for example, then this is not an area that we'll look to target with Content 360 workflow. But I bet if you look through your district, there are dozens and dozens of places where there are little paper processes that no one has visibility into, no one has any idea what happens after I submit this form, and that's the areas that we can look to with Content 360 workflow. Okay. Just a couple of quick, one more thing regarding workflow. The data that we're collecting in these forms is valuable in many cases. So using and hopefully the upcoming API release, we're very excited about being able to take this data and drive it directly into Business Plus, Finance Plus, or User Plus. So now I've got information that I've captured on forms, it's routed through workflow, and it can be actionable and updated into our line of business application. So something that we're very excited about that. I had to check an update. I have no idea what the PowerSchool acquisition has done to the timeline for that, but we're hoping it's still on track because again, we look to use that data very quickly. A few other quick things for those of you Outlook users. Again, we mentioned email's a big piece. Oh, Ralph?
So when it goes through the workflow, would it say that in Content 360 in each step, or it's just the final document?
No, the document is in Content 360 at all times. So if 5 people need access to it, they're all getting views into one document.
Right, but I was like wondering if, like, because then you can see where it got screwed up, if they messed up in phase 3 of it, maybe revert back to that.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So as far as completing forms, we actually do use workflow in the completion of some forms. In the event that we need to go back and say, okay, well, you know, so and so is supposed to fill out this section, they didn't fill it out right, so we can send it back to them in workflow. That's the easiest way to handle that process. Good question. So inside of Outlook, we have an Outlook plugin. I can just click on a document and import it into Content 360. An easy way to capture email. Additionally, we had a request yesterday regarding contracts. So something we did for Spring School District down in Texas is the ability to automatically create contracts based upon contact data we have. So taking these contracts, auto-populating them with data inside of Business Plus or Finance Plus, and then in their example, we actually put a link into Employee Online or Employee Access Center, and they're able to go and click on the link and then view the contract, click accept or not accept, and that's how they manage that. So quite a bit of savings from a paper perspective. And then also document retention. So this is becoming a much bigger challenge for many school districts. And I want to show this inside the software itself. So every document has a life cycle, right? It's got a creation date and it then ultimately has a destruction date. Some documents, some contracts, and then some state requirements require certain documents to be permanent. You can never get rid of them. Unfortunately, most school districts think that applies to all documents, because unless you have a retention schedule, your default is yes, keep it, right, for as long as necessary. So inside Content 360, we do like to use fields or set retention schedules. Every so often, we can go through and say, okay, has the retention date been reached? Yes or no? Show me all the documents where that retention schedule is passed. I can view those, and then at my discretion or an administrator's discretion, keep them or schedule them for destruction. So, yes, it is something that it's funny to me. Now, this is really not document management humor. This is just my individual humor. That I never have document retention schedule conversations with student folks. It's always with human resources and finance. And then I realized that, oh yeah, in most states, student documents are stored 75, 99, 100 years. So the current record administrator will be long retired before that becomes a problem. So, but anyway, retention is something that we want to keep an eye on, and something we definitely want to work with. Okay, any additional questions? And I'm going to go through quickly some of the Finance Plus integration.
Question on that, on the retention piece, that's at the document type definition. Is that what that's set up?
That's exactly right. We're setting it up under content type. Now, it is that's kind of that's the I should say the standard retention schedule. Some school districts will have very I shouldn't say. If you have a complex retention schedule, what we will actually do is build it out in workflow. So then you can have, you can, inside the regular one, you can place documents on hold, you can schedule them for destruction or not. But if you have something that's got to be reviewed by 5 people, they all have to check off on it, then we build that out as a workflow process.
How's the storage work for all the documents? I mean, is it going on your guys' server's website? Does it go into Business Plus? Our servers?
Sure. From a storage perspective, we store the documents wherever you want to store them. Inside our database, we're just storing security information, metadata, and a link to the document. So any UNC addressable path name, we can store the documents there. So they're not inside our database. They're not inside Business Plus, Finance Plus, or anywhere along those lines.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Good questions. Anything else? Okay. How many of you are, and I understand there's a couple of you using Finance Plus. We've got just about 4 or 5 minutes left, so I'm going to show you this. But one of the questions that I would ask is, of the Finance Plus users, how many folks here are in the finance office? Okay, fantastic. All right. So one of the things that we ran into, and by the way, we love workflow. Don't get me wrong. This is something that we could have accomplished using workflow. But since it's something that our users found a lot of value in, we went ahead and built this into the product because it is something that I think you could use, and it doesn't require workflow, the discovery process associated with that. So what we're trying to avoid is the situation where I've got a stack of AP vendor invoices, and every Friday when I go to run checks, I'm leafing through those invoices, trying to figure out which ones have been paid or not paid, so I can then turn around and cut the check, right? So this was a manual process. It involved a manila folder, someone fumbling through it every day or every week or whenever your pay period runs, and then having to update that information into Finance Plus. So in our example, we're actually going to take those documents and scan them into the software immediately. So the vendor invoices are being scanned as soon as we're receiving them. And we're going to populate a little bit of information about them, just a little bit enough for them to stay inside Content 360. And then Content 360 is actually polling Finance Plus to determine whether or not a document has been received, or the product has been received, and whether or not the invoice has been keyed into Finance Plus yet. So I'm going to go and I'm going to say, okay, it's not been keyed, but it has been received. Show me the list of documents that fit that description, the vendor invoices. Once I have that description, I can go in and complete my indexing process. Okay? Now, what does that mean? That means, so we've received the product, we have the invoice, now we need to go and key this information into Finance Plus. But we've already keyed a lot of this information into Content 360 during the indexing process, so I don't want to have to rekey that into Finance Plus now. So using our integration, and this is going to get a little bit clunky because typically I would have multiple monitors up here, but looking at the side-by-side view, I'm going to type my control number into Finance Plus. When I click the integration link, we're going to do a bidirectional sync, if you will, of the information on the screen. So the control number I typed here will populate into the control number field down here. We're going to update the keyed field to say now it is keyed into the software. And we're going to take the information that we already have indexed this document by in Finance Plus, in Content 360, and fill that into Finance Plus. All right, so what we're doing is we're using the information, it's only had to be keyed in one time, and it's updated in both systems. Now, the next step in that process was generally going and figuring out, okay, now I'm going to run the checks. Let me make sure that the information balances for my check registry. And they were using, in many cases, they're using a tape now, keying this information in and using a register tape. So I can go in and key in my control number, click search. Here's all the documents that are up with this check run. I can see the total there. I can compare that with the check register by fund inside Finance Plus, and then know that that check's valid and it's good for payment. So it's kind of another check in the process. So any questions for that from the Finance Plus users? Is that valuable? Is that something that
Will it in turn, after the check's been run, put the check number back over onto Content 360?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, and the last thing I'll mention, we talked about this earlier, so and this is Business Plus or Finance Plus, a lot of times if you have a coding process that is complex, or you want users or departments or individual school districts to code AP invoices, instead of having that process work in finance, since we have the ability to work with HTML forms, we can actually accommodate that process as part of our AP approval workflow. So just another thing that we're working on there. Okay, we're just about out of time. Any additional questions? All right, y'all have been fantastic. I appreciate you sitting in here. Here's our contact information. We'll be at the booth for the rest of the morning. If you think of any questions, let me know. Otherwise, you'll get an email with a recorded link to the presentation, and you'll feel free to share with other people that weren't able to make it here today. All right. Thank y'all very much.